Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And once again, we must stare into the abyss as it stares back at us. What does it mean? Is it all nothingness, or is it the great beyond? We will never know. But here we are, looking at one instance where maybe it is something.
I knew that was coming. I'm excited. We have had so many good opportunities already this season for impressions from Jason. So
and I've held back. I could have done a lot more Dreyfus.
You could have, and I would have been okay with it, really. But we're here to do some Herzog impressions. No, we're here to talk about the films of 1975 and to talk about our Cannes Film Festival winner, which is Werner Herzog's The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. As we do some years, we are not talking about the Palme d'Or winner from Cannes, which is a film that was kind of obscure and difficult for us to find. I don't know if it's really available to watch anywhere. So we're looking at a movie instead that won.
Josh, what is the name of the movie that was so obscure that you didn't even mention it?
Yeah, it's a film called Chronicle of the Years of Fire about the war in Algiers, and was also the Algerian entry for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars, although it was not nominated. And yeah, I mean, we try usually to steer away from stuff that is so obscure that we might not really have anything to say about it. It's also 3 hours long, but I think the main thing was it's not streaming. It's not available for digital rental. It's not available on DVD. I'm not sure how we would have even seen it. So we decided to pivot to a film that won 3 other awards at the festival in 1975, including the Grand Prix, which is essentially second place. And it also won the Fipresci Prize, which is an award given out by an organization of film critics, and the prize of the Ecumenical Jury, which has weirdly come up in multiple Cannes episodes we've done, which is an award given out by a religious group for films that deal with
Christian
religious themes. Yeah.
And I think we've talked about the Fipresci Prize before. Look, we're going to hit a lot of, things we've talked about. We've talked about Bruno S before. We've talked about Werner Herzog before, Josh. So, we're going to just autopilot through this episode.
We're going to try not to do that. It's not like it's a Rob Reiner episode. Come on, Jason.
Well, when we get to a different film, Cannes year, then we'll get there again.
Yes. So we have talked about, in our 1977 season, another Herzog film starring Bruno S, Strosek. And this is the first film that Herzog and Bruno S worked on together. And in fact, Herzog saw, I believe, as a documentary about the life of Bruno S and decided this is the person that I must cast in my film about Kaspar Hauser. It doesn't matter that in real life, Kaspar Hauser was 17 when he was discovered in the town square in Nuremberg, and Bruno S was 41 when he made this film. He's the only guy for the role. And I have to say, maybe he was right.
Yeah, I think, he caught something spiritually there. But that documentary is called Bruno the Black, One Day a Hunter Blew His Horn.
That is quite a title.
Yeah.
And
it feels very German.
It does indeed. And I mean, part of the reason that Herzog wanted Bruno S is because his life parallels Kaspar Hauser's in some way, in that he's this sort of man adrift, and he's discovered not living in the wild, but almost apart from civilization or whatever. And Kaspar Hauser was a real person who was discovered in the town of Nuremberg when he was 17 years old and was unable
in the mid 1800s.
Yes, it's 1828 is the year that this movie takes place. And that was when he was discovered with this note. And a lot of the details in the film, in Herzog's film, are actually historically accurate. You would think Herzog, even in his documentaries, he always has that idea of like ecstatic truth, and that's more important than fidelity to facts or whatever. But there's quite a lot of real information in this film.
And Josh, I just want to also mention we did see Werner Herzog eat his own shoe, and as we discussed, 1980 Les Blanc films. So
yes,
is there anything this man can't do?
I'm sure there's some like make a Fast and Furious movie or something like that.
I
Make a
think he
Marvel
could do
movie.
it.
Yeah.
He could
Yeah,
do
he'd
it.
pull
I
it
mean,
off.
there was some good action in Rescue Dawn. Come on, man.
Sure. All right. I stand corrected. There's nothing that Herzog cannot do. And yeah.
He stumped you, Josh?
You stumped me. I don't know. I should bow to Herzog and not acknowledge any flaws.
Well, no, I mean, look, he's just so interesting as a human being, right? That like he's taking on this kind of pop cultural lore, as we've talked about. But let's focus on this film,
right?
here,
And this is kind of before that period. You know, this is a narrative film. He's not in the film. He doesn't narrate it or anything. Although I will say there's that quote at the beginning that comes from. It's not from Herzog himself, but it's about something like, have you ever heard the scream that mankind calls silence, or something like that? And I just, as soon as that came up on screen, I imagined hearing that in Herzog's voice.
Have you ever heard the scream that mankind calls silence?
Exactly. Something like that. I should have written down the exact quote. So this movie also, like that Algerian film, was submitted to the Oscars. It was the official Oscar submission from West Germany, but it was not nominated for a foreign language film Oscar. It did win a couple awards at the German Film Awards for its editing and for its scene design. And, speaking of Herzog and his outlook on life, we call this movie The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. It was also released in the US as The Mystery of Kaspar Hauser. But the original title, the translation of the German title, is Every Man for Himself and God Against All.
Hell yeah, that's goth.
Oh man, that sounds like a Craig Zoller film.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's something now that, of course, Herzog would get to keep that title, but not when he was
Nicholas Winding Refn or someone like that.
Yeah.
So I'm deep cutting today, boys, on these filmmaker references.
Yeah,
so.
those are both good references, though. I feel like that's something that now some serious European art film auteur or whatever would get to keep that title, but not.
Yeah, I know, and we kind of like went into this like knowing what the movie was about, but not having seen it before, and it was like, you got Herzog and you got that title, and David seen it before me, and he said I was going to hate it. I found it a little more hopeful than I think we had at once thought.
Yeah, I kind of thought that too, based on what Dave had said, that this would be a movie about this pure, simple guy who's just destroyed by society. And that's not what it is. I mean, he is kind of destroyed, although a lot of that destruction maybe comes from himself. But society is kinder to him than I would have imagined it might be from the description and from Herzog's sort of reputation.
Maybe I was just thinking about that title.
I mean, he was literally, the story goes that for the first 17 years of his life, he was captive, I guess, in like a barn or a loft or something. He never saw other people. There was like a man who I guess took care of him, but was it his dad? Did he hold him hostage? Like, what the heck? He didn't have any kind of acclimation to the real world. So I feel like society did much better than that.
Right. They did much better than his captor, who claims, at least, right, that it was not his father, but that he was sort of charged with taking care of this child when the kid was an infant. And he said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'm going to lock him in a room. That's what I'll do with this kid that you've given me.
And even in that first act where you see him in the captor, which, by the way, what a low bar. Can you do better than the person holding you captive for 17 years? Right. So, but like even that guy, like neglectful, yes, but like he wasn't like the mean, like horrible, like bad guy in a horror movie or silent. He wasn't Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. He was just he just should have had no right to raise a child, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, he did chain the guy to a floor, so.
Well, that's bad. Yes. I don't remember. Maybe I blocked that part out there. So,
and he does murder him later, probably. So, but
even worse.
We'll get to that though.
So I'll take back those things I said. But I did say in Act 1, he doesn't come off as like the worst person.
Right. It isn't a movie about like someone who's been tortured and then has escaped or whatever. I think it's meant to be a mystery, an enigma, if you will, as to why he was held captive this way and why he was released.
And I think we know why he was released, but I don't really think we ever know why any of this happened.
No.
But I guess that's the point of a Herzog movie.
Indeed. So critics at the time were mostly positive and slightly baffled, which sounds about right for a Herzog film. Richard Eder in the New York Times said, Werner Herzog is a young German director with a rapidly growing reputation in Europe and, as yet, not much of a name here. Every Man for Himself, which won this year's Grand Jury Prize at the Cannes Film Festival, should change that. Mr. Herzog does not deal with small corners of reality. He riddles with universals. Every Man is a superb movie because Mr. Herzog has managed to treat the fable in stunning human and dramatic terms. He has done so, in large part, through his use of a man identified only as Bruno S. He is not a professional actor, and he has spent some time in mental institutions, as Kaspar. There is more than acting. There is a total magical immersion of Bruno in the man who arrives in the world as a stranger, takes it in, tries to grasp it, judges it, and is removed from it.
Yeah, Bruno is he is very captivating, right? Whatever you think of him as a performer, you just want to keep watching him.
Yeah, I found him more fascinating, even though, we talked about Strosek, and that after Herzog kind of got to know Bruno a little more and had worked with him, that is a movie where a lot of the details are actually inspired by Bruno's own life. And so he's sort of playing himself in a way. But I found him really more fascinating in this movie where he's playing a character who maybe shares some traits with him, but just the way he carries himself, the way he looks, the way he seems to almost never blink. His eyes are always open, and the way that he has to be kind of propped up, like he's one of those dolls that can't fall over or whatever, but he's always teetering.
A ventriloquist dummy?
Not a ventriloquist dummy, but one of those things that has like a weighted base, so you can kind of try to push it over and it just pops right back up.
The boxing guys, you hit him and he bounces back and bounces forward again.
Yeah, something like that.
I also liked his emphasis in expressing his words.
I expected a Herzog impression. I did not expect a Bruno S impression. I love it.
I don't know if I expected it either, but I think that was at least cadence-wise, not too inaccurate there. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, I think he really conveys that. And also, even after time has passed, there's this 2-year time jump at one point in this film where Kaspar has spent more time among people and has learned more, and he can speak better, but he still has that weird pattern like you're describing there, or just this strange way of understanding the world that sticks with him, and it's fascinating.
How could you not, given what he's gone through?
Yes. So Stephen Schiff in the Boston Phoenix was also pretty positive. He said, Werner Herzog's The Mystery of Kaspar Hauser, with its evocative rendering of early 19th century Nuremberg and its remarkable star, the schizophrenic Bruno S., casts a spell not easily broken. Though the theme is familiar, Herzog's approach is new. Dispensing with narrative conventions, he relies instead upon the resonant image, the telling montage. Yet this is a light film, imbued with a visionary serenity, rich with incident and humor, and alive with Kaspar's own wonder at the myriad beauties and terrors of the world. Herzog transports us into Kaspar's consciousness, and his explorations there call our own knowledge into question.
Yeah, I kind of agree. When you think of Strozek, it was as crazy as we wanted a Herzog movie to be, right?
Right.
But this one really has a finesse to it and a humanity to it, and certain things that we think might go against the myth of Herzog, right? But it's really a really interesting character portrait done with real sensitivity.
Yeah, I think I like this more than Strozek, in part because, yes, you're right that Strozek is maybe more of what you expect from Herzog in the what a bunch of crazy shit. But it felt like a lot of that movie was what a bunch of random shit that just kind of is haphazard. And this movie had a more streamlined focus and a sort of clearer theme in terms of Kaspar and the way he saw the world. I think I liked it a little more.
You did mention that it won an award at the German film awards for like scene design, I guess.
Yeah, which I guess is like production design. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so let's call it production design. Really took you to that time and place.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, whether it's, whatever town he was able to find, it's in fact, I think I'm about to say the name of that town in the next review and butcher it. But yeah, it really does immerse you in that period and in the way that people viewed the world. So finally, Pauline Kael in the New Yorker was a little more mixed. She said, Werner Herzog has achieved a visionary overcast style. The higgledy-piggledy pink and blue roofs of the town of Dinkelsbühl, where the mystery of Kaspar Hauser was shot, suggests the world of a German primitive painter or of an awkward, self-taught puppeteer who has gone a little haywire. Herzog is a film poet, but he's a didactic poet, and what he has to say is extremely fashionable right now. The film says that society stultifies you under the guise of civilizing you, and that education destroys your innocent true perceptions. In Herzog's dedication to film art, he denies us the simple pleasures of story involvement, of suspense, of interest in the people on the screen, of sexuality. His goodness saps our strength.
I mean, if we were giving awards for all-time sentences in a review, Josh, that wins it right there. Give it to us again.
Yeah, which you just want me to say higgledy-piggledy again? Is that what you're trying to
do?
I mean,
that whole sentence, like just bam, 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 bam.
Yeah,
right?
No, she's very good, and her reviews are so long; it's always hard to kind of boil them down. So I think I did my best to get at the points that she's trying to make. But
read that.
Okay, sure. Werner Herzog has achieved a visionary overcast style. The higgledy-piggledy pink and blue roofs of the town of Dinkelsbühl, where the mystery of Kaspar Hauser was shot, suggests the world of a German primitive painter or of an awkward, self-taught puppeteer who has gone a little haywire.
Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. Like that's a perfect sentence for Werner Herzog.
Yeah, and I think he would probably agree, maybe not with her later assessment, but with that he's evoking things like that, almost like outsider art. I mean, that's what Kaspar Hauser is, and he wants to give that impression within the film.
Yeah, I think outsider art is a really good way to look at this. And in a way, I was kind of reminded of those early Jim Jarmusch movies of the 80s. Like if you look at, this kind of fits into New Hollywood, but in like, the outsider way. But also like you could see how this would influence that American independent film movement in the 80s.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And Bruno S, the equivalent in a way of, casting like a punk rock musician or something.
Well, John Laurie, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that who we always used to cast? And like, he's just another crazy, interesting character who had like a painting show on like IFC for 2 seasons in the early 90s.
Yeah, now doesn't he have a fishing show on HBO now, I think?
It might be reversed. It might have been a fishing show then and a painting show now.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But that would be like, and he was a musician or is a musician. That's a good equivalent to like casting a Bruno S.
Right, a Bruno S who was also a musician and a painter. So yeah, he should have had his own HBO Max show, Bruno S. That would have been amazing.
I will succeed. Logan Roy.
Yeah, that wasn't the one I was thinking of, but sure, put him on all the HBO shows. Why not? So I know we're all big Herzog fans, but I think none of us had seen this movie before, right, Jason?
I never even heard of it.
Oh wow, okay, mm-hmm. Yeah, I had heard of it as one of his, more notable films, but I had not seen it. I haven't seen, I think, as many of his fiction films as his documentaries. But Dave, had you seen this?
No.
Yeah, and as we said, you kind of watched this a little early and gave us these warnings, but I think we were all pretty fascinated by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not like it. I thought it was really good. I just I think I read it a little darker than you guys.
Yeah, like I said, I was expecting that darkness, and I found that there was actually some. I mean, it's definitely harsh at times, but I think there was more optimism in there than I was expecting. So, anything else you want to mention on the background of this film, Jason?
Josh, to perform in the scene where Kaspar learns to walk, Bruno S knelt for 3 hours with a stick behind his knees until his legs were too numb to stand.
Why not? That's dedication right there. And then Herzog was like, "What are you doing? We have a scene to shoot." And it was just what he was doing for fun, maybe.
Right. Well, there are those stories of like, I went to the hotel to find Bruno, and instead of sleeping in his bed, he was on the floor by the door.
Yeah, Herzog, between Bruno and people like Klaus Kinski, he's definitely finding challenges for himself in terms of his collaborators, but one would expect nothing less from Werner Herzog.
Says the man who wanted to pull a entire ship over a mountain in the Amazon.
Exactly. So we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on the Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1975, we are talking about Cannes Film Festival award winner, The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. And as we're saying, I think we all like this to varying degrees, at least. Maybe not the best of Herzog or our favorite Herzog, but a lot of fascinating stuff going on in this film.
What I thought, you see movies like this where it's like, oh, here's a person who's an object of fascination, right? And I use the word object because they objectify him, but like I thought like this town like really tried, whether right or wrong, to like ingratiate Bruno into their lives and like, give him a better life than he had. And I was like happy about that.
Right.
As opposed to just like, haha, look at the freak, or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of that.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think you're right that within the context of some 19th century small German town, with the knowledge that they have and the resources that they have, they're doing what they feel like is best for him. And they don't treat him poorly. I mean, he is kind of in a cell when he first arrives. They put him in like, which is what I guess is like a jail cell, but he seems free to come and go, and he has visitors, and they try to figure out the best place for him. And then eventually he goes to live with this the Professor Daumer, who treats him quite well, I think. For the most part, people seem to be nice to him.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, because I thought that actor was good who played Daumer.
Yeah.
And then I read that he had been a Nazi sympathizer, and I wasn't too thrilled about that.
Yeah, that's not great, but he is good. I mean, I personally...
Walter Ladengast.
Yes, exactly. My favorite, I mean, aside from Bruno S, but my favorite performer in this film was Clemens Scheitz or Scheis, I believe.
I think we're on the same. Is that the town scribe?
Yes, Clemens Scheitz as the scribe, who's a great character. And he of course is in Strosek as well. He plays Strosek's like uncle, is it, or something like that?
In Wisconsin, or whatever.
Yeah, but I loved that character too, because it's like this guy who spends all his time like following around the town, like authority figures, writing down everything that they say. And there's a great, to me, what was the like sort of dry humor here is that early in the film, Kaspar is left in the town square holding this letter that his captor / father or whatever has left him with. And when they bring him in, and it's addressed to this military captain, so the military captain reads the letter, and the town scribe or whatever is like transcribing the letter, which is already written down as the captain reads it aloud. And he keeps pausing like, did you get that? Did you get that? Like, it's literally written right there. We don't need to write it again.
Yeah, he did do a lot of like, they would be like, well, maybe we could bring him to the captain. And then he would be like, bring him to the captain. Yes, bring him to the captain. Right. And then like he would always be like, my report is going to be so thorough that nobody will ever be able to question. He was very committed to getting this report done.
Yes, and he was very excited about it. And he, he's I feel like almost more than any other character aside from Kaspar himself, he's throughout the whole movie. I mean, we see him there toward the beginning, and he's like the last person we see at the end of the movie after he's written his report on Kaspar's death.
And I thought that there we go. Spoiler alert, guys.
Yeah, for a real historical figure
from the 1820s. So, at the end, the captor comes back and apparently murders him, we think.
Yes.
And I thought the end of the movie was going to be like Kaspar telling that story where like nobody knows it. And then they have that little add-on where that's like where they're doing an autopsy, and his brain was formed differently, and this and that was a little weird to me, that little last 3 minutes of like, this explains a lot. Like I didn't know what that was really there for, but hey, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it seemed like that scene where, and it had been building to that, where Kaspar talks about the story, which must be one of his dreams or whatever, where he's like, I know the beginning, but I don't know the rest. And the professor admonishes him at the time, like, well, you don't tell the story unless you know the end. And then finally, when he's on his deathbed, they say, go ahead, tell us the story. That does seem like the nice moment to end it on. But I think the part of the point maybe of that scene where you're saying like they're all like, oh, this explains everything, I think is the idea of it has to be explained from these people's perspectives. Like Kaspar has to have an explanation. We have to be able to say, oh, his brain was formed strangely. And that accounts for why he was so weird. Like,
right,
he can't
not
just
the fact that he was in a dungeon for 17 years or whatever.
Or he can't just be like an enigma. It can't just be like something strange that exists in the world.
Well, I guess that's, I look at it as the nature versus nurture type thing. And, they're taking the nature argument, which you're saying. And I think the nurture had a lot to do with it.
Right. I'm not arguing in favor of one or another, but I think what Herzog is showing is the sort of need for people to have explanations for everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And all these years later, now we have ending explained videos on YouTube for every movie.
Yeah.
So.
Where was
did you find one for this, Dave?
No, I didn't look.
That would be amazing. But I mean, Kaspar Hauser, the real person, has been the subject of all of these investigations over the years. And, the speculation that he was some sort of secret royal heir that they were trying to get rid of, or the idea that this was all like a con, and that, all the way up to his death, where he says he was stabbed by the person who held him captive. But in fact, maybe really he stabbed himself to kind of get attention and did it, deeper than he meant to and ended up dying. So, I mean, there continues to be a fascination with explaining who this guy really was and what was his deal.
I mean, you could also understand if he did want to commit suicide. He oftentimes said how, the noise of other people, was ruining his head, so to speak, or he couldn't really acclimate as well as he tried.
Right. Or certainly not as well as sort of the people around him might have wanted. I mean, there's that scene where the English nobleman comes to town and is going to like adopt Kaspar as his protege. And as soon as Kaspar does something too weird, he's like, nope, forget it. I'm out. I'm done.
Right. Or, and that what was interesting about that scene is when like Kaspar goes to the other room to like take a rest. He's like, shall I regale you of my tales of my trip to Greece? And it's like the 1800s. So like they're, oh yes. And it's like the skies were blue and the sands were gold. And everyone is just so, enthralled by that, which is obviously a different time period. But what about the scene I thought was where the guy, it was Kaspar and the housemaid and the man, he might have been a religious man or might not have been, who was like, there's only one way to find out if Kaspar understands logic. And he gives him this riddle, and it's a very, long riddle. And he explains how the answer works, and then Kaspar comes up with a totally different answer that works equally as well, and he's like, no, that cannot be the answer. Only our answer can be the answer.
Yeah, that guy I think is meant to be like a professor of logic or mathematics or something. And there's another scene where he's similarly berated by a pastor or a priest or something. But yeah, that's a great scene. And what's even better is, he presents this logic problem and his answer is very convoluted. It's very like, if then this, and, if X then Y and that kind of stuff. And the housemaid is like, well, I don't understand your answer, but I understand Kaspar's answer. And the professor's like, it's not about understanding. In logic and math, we don't understand things. We deduce things. And it was a little on the nose, but it was a very amusing.
Right. He just found a basic answer instead of doing A to B to C to D to E to get there and whatnot. And that is unacceptable.
Right. There's that other scene then where he's being sort of similarly interrogated by this priest who's asking him about God. And they seem to want to prove that even isolated from the world and from knowledge about religion, that Kaspar would have had some sense of the higher power. And he's like, nope. And they cannot accept that.
I want to ask Dave, why did, I don't know how you felt Josh was going to like this, but you did say you thought I was going to hate this. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think that I thought that you would be kind of turned off by the pacing of just, it's this guy going through these series of interacting with people, but not necessarily a lot happening, plot wise. And I think I just thought that you would be turned off by that kind of a structure for this.
Yeah. I like things where not a lot of things happen. I mean, I love those Linkletter walk and talk movies and everything. So it just, I don't know. I thought this one was, I almost was like, maybe it's time. Because, I've had a lot of depression issues lately, a lot of stuff going on. So I was like, maybe this one's, if Dave thinks I'm going to hate it this much, maybe it's time to get a guest host in here. Maybe it's too much for me to handle, but I'm glad I watched it and I liked it.
So.
Oh, we don't want anyone else in here,
That's
Jason.
right.
We want your perspective, whatever personal circumstances are influencing it. We want to hear it.
Did you think that Josh would just delve into it and be like, yes, the meaningless of everything is what I relate to?
The real question is whether or not either of you would have liked it more or less than Strosek. I liked Strosek a lot more than either of you, I remember.
Yeah, I like this more. Like I was saying, I thought I liked this more than Strosek. I felt like it. Not that I loved this necessarily. I mean, it is a bit scattered still, but I felt like this had a better focus and was keeping my interest more in this guy and what was going to happen to him.
Mm.
I think I like Strosek more, but we saw that one first, and like that's my first impression of Bruno S. So like that'll stick with me, you know. But had I seen this first, I might have been like, wow, this guy is such a mesmerizing presence. This is the one I like more. But hey, they're both good films.
Yeah, they are. And I mean, I think it's fascinating. I'm not familiar that much with these earlier narrative Herzog films. I mean, when we talked about Les Blanc, and I've seen Burden of Dreams, but I still haven't seen like Fitzcarraldo, which is the movie that Burden of Dreams is about. And that's a well-known early Herzog film. But I think these films are always fascinating because you can see the origins of a lot of that Herzog persona and the perspective that we get from him in these documentaries where he himself is such a strong presence now. And, that stuff really originated in these earlier films.
Do you think we should rate this, Josh?
Yeah, I feel like we should. I don't know if there's, I did want to highlight one other scene that I thought was fascinating, which is the circus scene where, and if we want to talk about like society mistreating Kaspar, I feel like that's the number one scene where he has been, after he was sort of a burden on the town and the taxpayers, and they wanted to get him out of the jail or wherever it is they've been holding him and, giving him room and board for free. He ends up in this circus. And we have this great sequence that is really kind of sad of all the like quote freaks in this circus, including this like dwarf king who is played by an actor who starred in a previous Herzog film called Even Dwarfs Started Small, which I have not seen, but Helmut Doring was one of the stars of that film. And we've got him, and we've got this I think they say he's an Indian who plays this sort of flute that he plays with his nose. And it's just a very bizarre, like sad spectacle, but also very amusing. So, I mean, that to me was one of the highlights of this movie as well.
Did you feel like certain comparisons to like the Elephant Man with some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I actually haven't seen the Elephant Man, but that sounds right. I mean, a lot of the reviews that I read compared it to stuff like Tarzan or The Jungle Book with, these children who've been raised in the wild and then have to re-encounter civilization.
That sounds a little basic.
All right. You're calling Pauline Kael basic.
I don't know. This is, I don't know. Tarzan isn't a true story, is it? So,
no.
You know what I mean? Like this and the Elephant Man were based on true stories,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So, and they were, in a way there was like a humanity, but in a way they were both exploited. So
right. And I think of, I don't know, I thought of, well, this isn't a true story either, and this is later, but I thought of like Room, the Brie Larson movie, where they're held captive and the child has been raised for his, the first 6 or 8 or whatever years of his life, just in this one room. And he's got some Kaspar Hauser aspects to his personality, I think, after they get out of there.
Yeah, I thought of that as well.
So, you want to give this a rating, Jason?
Sure. What are we rating it out of, Josh?
I don't know. 5 mysterious letters?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or piano solos?
Sure, yes. Kaspar is an interesting pianist at one point when he's kind of put on display, and that's with the nobleman, I believe, right? And he tries to play the piano and gets overwhelmed.
I will give it 3, Josh. 3 piano solos.
Yeah, I give it 3 as well. I did like it, and we've been very positive about it. I feel like it's also still a bit scattered, and there's just as many sequences where you're like, okay, sure. And, you can kind of go with it. But yeah, I wasn't as captivated as I am by some Herzog movies, but it is good. So 3 for me. Dave, what would you say?
I'm also going 3, guys.
All right. Well, we'll come back then in a moment and talk about the legacy of the Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1975, we are talking about Cannes Film Festival award winner, The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. And we have talked a lot about Werner Herzog and his career when we discussed Strosek, as well as when we talked about Les Blanc. So I don't know what else we want to say here, but I do feel like this movie is an early example of, he's made so many movies about sort of like men with weird obsessions and single-minded, sort of slightly deranged people. And, you can look at this movie and see the echoes of it in movies going all the way out to like Rescue Dawn and Bad Lieutenant and stuff that came decades later.
Josh, the last 2, The Fire Within and Theater of Thought, he's always talking about what is communication, what is purpose, what is humanity. Have you seen either of those 2?
No, and the Theater of Thought, which is his most recent movie, has just played festivals. I don't think it's actually been distributed widely yet. And I haven't seen, what was the title of the other one before that?
The Fire Within.
Yeah, which is about the same, though, that couple who were the volcanologists that were the subject of that film Fire of Love that got a lot more attention. And Herzog happened to make a movie about the same subject at the same time. So I haven't seen that, or Fire of Love for that matter, but I'd be curious.
I've seen Fire of Love. It's good, but I would like to see this as a comparison piece. Speaking of those kind of like single-minded obsession type people, what I had read is the thing that he's working on now, which we hope comes to pass. It's probably going to be like an Apple TV show or something, for Hulu or whatever. Fordlandia, a powerful American automobile manufacturer named Henry Ford, attempts to build a factory in the Brazilian rainforest.
Is that a real thing? That happened? That's amazing. Yeah.
I guess it's a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, obviously that brings to mind Fitzcarraldo. It brings to mind Aguirre. It sounds perfect for Herzog. Yeah. I mean, he's 80 years old now, but he still seems to be going pretty strong. He doesn't seem like he's slowing himself down in any way. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want all these guys to just ride out, doing what they want to do. Most of these people, a lot of these filmmakers we're talking about who are on their last act right now.
Yes, indeed. So do you have any other Herzog favorites that you want to shout out?
I think I mentioned it last time. I really liked Encounters at the End of the World, the one where he goes to McMurdo in Antarctica. And I think we all probably know Grizzly Man as like his most famed documentary here in America.
Yeah, those are both really good. And I recently watched, it was just a couple years after this, his version of Nosferatu from 1979 with Klaus Kinski. And that movie is fantastic. And I feel like it actually captures a lot. I don't know if it was shot in some of the same places, but it has that same immersion that we were talking about related to like the locations and the set design, where it's just like this complete other world of this like tucked away little German town and the weird people in it. And it also has the Nazi guy who plays the professor in this film, the Walter Ladengast. And Kinski, of course, is great in it. But it's a really fascinating, you wouldn't necessarily think that a vampire movie would be Herzog's like in his wheelhouse, but it's great. I loved it.
Yeah. And then he made the documentary about Klaus Kinski after Kinski's daughter came out and said that she was sexually abused by him, and he had to kind of do a referendum on his relationship with Klaus Kinski. I never saw that. Did you?
No, My Best Fiend is the name of that. And of course, Herzog and Kinski had that very complicated relationship. And as we've mentioned, I don't know, I keep bringing up Documentary Now, but there is a great Herzog-inspired episode of Documentary Now in this most recent season that's a lot inspired by his relationship with Kinski and what they show in Burden of Dreams. So check out Documentary Now, of course.
Yeah. And watch him eat his shoe in the short documentary.
Yeah. That was on, I think it was on Criterion for a while. I don't know if it still is, but I'm sure you can find it somewhere.
Whew.
We also talked about Bruno S when we did our Strosek episode, and this and Strosek are essentially the extent of Bruno's acting career. He was in a handful of documentaries later in his life, but seemed to have kind of given up being an actor and focused on his painting and his music, and I don't know, just living his weird little life, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention is that we didn't talk about is like, and a lot of these 70s filmmakers really like shine here, showcasing landscape and like the beauty of nature, and just kind of, I know, Herzog kind of utilized different techniques and maybe created some imaging to showcase the landscape in softer or brighter ways. And I thought that was really effective in the movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's something that draws you in immediately. I think one of the reviews, I didn't quote this part, but it begins with just this description of the opening shots of the film. And I think right away you get the sense of Herzog as being in command of the tone and what he's trying to convey. And really it puts you right in this other realm that you are not familiar with. And it's fascinating right from the beginning.
What about this as like, as far as its legacy, like on directors working with like non-actors on things like this? Like, it seems like a lot of like independent filmmakers that we talk about, Harmony Korine, for example, last season, like love to use non-actors in movies. And that's kind of a legacy here.
Yeah, I mean, hasn't Herzog worked with Harmony Korine? Isn't he in one of Harmony Korine's movies?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Maybe in Julian Donkey Boy or
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, but certainly, I mean, as we're like Jason was talking about Jim Jarmusch,
yeah,
like that, absolutely, that is a thing. And Herzog is seeking these people out. And, in some cases, he's making a documentary about them. And in some cases, he's saying, I'm going to put you in my fiction film. But he's just always looking for these strange, interesting characters to put on screen in some way.
Right. And he wants to blur the fiction and the reality of it as well.
Yes, of course, which we see more, I think, in Strosek when it's inspired by real things from Bruno S.'s life. Jason, you mentioned the pianist in this film, the blind pianist. Florian Frick is the actor there, who's mainly a composer. He composed the music for this film and worked on a bunch of other Herzog movies, and is not blind in reality.
He was not.
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, he was a composer who composed music for multiple Herzog movies, including this one. So, a longtime collaborator there as well. A bunch of actors in this film. We don't necessarily need to run through them all. I did note our favorite Clemens Scheitz, who also worked with Herzog multiple times, is in Strosek and is in Nosferatu as well, the vampire movie that I mentioned. And it just has like his face and the way he looks is so you're immediately drawn to him, I feel like.
I noted that Brigitte Mira, who I believe played the housemaid, had multiple collaborations with Werner Fassbinder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a major filmmaker that we haven't, I feel like we've discussed potentially covering a few times and haven't quite fit that in, but an incredibly important and prolific German filmmaker.
Yes.
Kaspar Hauser, the story, who again was a real person, has inspired multiple different interpretations. I mean, I noted down there was another German film in 1993 that was kind of a bigger epic. There's a graphic novel from 2007, a small independent film that kind of is very loosely inspired by him, it seems like, in 2012, starring Vincent Gallo. There are 2 operas about Kaspar Hauser. So this is a story that continues to fascinate artists.
Vincent Gallo seems like he would be the type of person who would gravitate towards this.
Yes, I agree. And I feel like he's one that would like, seems like he would be on Herzog's wavelength. Like, I don't think they've ever worked together, but I feel like they could or would.
Maybe if there's a Buffalo 66 sequel, Josh.
I feel like Vincent Gallo has just been in hiding for the past decade or so. I don't know what he even does anymore.
That sounds right also.
Yeah. So anything else you want to talk about on the legacy of this film, Jason?
I'm going to just continue to breathe and get through it, baby.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. That's the way to do it. So so that is the Enigma of Kaspar Hauser. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Check us out online and on social media.
Find us at... All right, I'll just move on. AwesomeMovieYear.com. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all those fancy socials. You can also find me at Eat This Comedy or eatthiscomedy.com. Okay, bye.
I love when you break out the unexpected impressions. It was like when suddenly you were doing Alan Arkin in our Argo episode, and it was just perfect. So I love it.
Thanks, buddy. Go for Jason on Letterboxd.
Yeah, check out all that stuff. I have some stuff at joshbellhateseverything.com. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter, and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. And I actually just used the Enigma of Kaspar Hauser as a puzzle piece on the Fool's Paradise episode. And follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
That is amazing. Really, we're broadening Dave's horizons so
much. What a win.
Yeah.
Did your guest on that one know the movie?
No, but she brought up being there, which, they both fit. So
yeah. So Jason, what are we talking about in our next episode?
Josh, we're going to the documentary. I've been looking forward to this one because I honestly think you could argue it's the greatest documentary ever made. It's Grey Gardens, baby.
I'm looking forward to that too because I have not seen it yet. So tune in next time for Grey Gardens, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Jason Howers.
It's a little baby.
Such a great start to this episode.
All right, there we go.